So on behalf of Indivisible West Marin, I want to welcome you to this evening. It's very exciting to see the Dance Palace so wonderfully filled with lots of old friends, new friends, people from our community, and people from outside the community. Indivisible West Marin, if you don't know, is a volunteer organization dedicated to electing Democrats nationwide, lobbying for progressive legislation, rebuilding our democracy, and defeating the Trump agenda. So again, yeah. Welcome to this evening, which is a fundraiser for the Center for Common Ground, a Virginia-based organization dedicated to fighting voter suppression. You will meet its executive director, Andrea Miller, hear about the Reclaim Our Vote campaign, and learn how each and every one of you can join us in this very important effort. So, why are we all here tonight? Indivisible West Marin believes that the pathway to winning elections in 2020 is to expand the electorate. In other words, to increase the number of people voting by reaching out specifically to voters of color and fighting voter suppression. For the past year, Indivisible West Marin has worked closely with Reclaim Our Vote, which is a campaign of the Center for Common Ground. And what we do is contact voters who have been purged from voter rolls in a number of key states, including Virginia, North Carolina, and now Texas. We do this by using phone numbers and addresses supplied by Reclaim Our Vote. We call and write voters to let them know they may no longer be registered, and that they need to re-register and they need to vote. For phone numbers that have been disconnected or numbers are wrong, Andrea's organization gives those names and addresses to partner organizations on the ground, such as Black Voters Matter and Mia Familia Vota. These organizations physically visit the addresses or mail postcards to try again to contact these persons. It is a methodical complement to the work of volunteers like us over here in California who make the initial calls or mail the first postcards. When election time rolls around, we again call and write these voters to get out the vote. This kind of work has significantly increased voter registration and voter turnout by people of color in states with long, ugly histories of voter suppression. By expanding the electorate and contacting former voters that many campaigns choose to ignore, Reclaim Our Vote has played a major role in helping flip elections from red to blue, most recently a few months ago in Virginia. And a Democrat was elected governor in Kentucky, and a Democratic governor was re-elected in Louisiana. So we're now focused on Texas, the arch enemy of California. We are calling and writing into specific congressional districts, and Andrea will explain how those were chosen. It weren't not random, it's very data-driven. And these are the districts which have both high numbers of voters who have been taken off the rolls and also large communities of color. So the agenda for this evening is, I'm going to introduce Andrea very briefly. She's going to talk to us about the work of Reclaim Our Vote, especially in Texas. I'm going to tell you more after she speaks about what you can concretely do in the coming weeks and months to support the work of Reclaim Our Vote, and then we'll have questions and answers. So Andrea, come on up. So all I want to say is that Andrea is a nationally known leader in the fight for voting rights for people of color. She's the founding board member, executive director, and digital strategist for the Center for Common Ground, a 501c3 nonprofit organization based in Virginia. And she'll tell you more about herself and her background and how she got to be here as she goes on. Andrea, thanks.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. There we go. Got to use the deep voice. So, thank you. Well, actually, I'm going to be official. The great Commonwealth of Virginia officially thanks Indivisible West Marin for making us the former capital of the Confederacy. It was a long time coming. So thank you, thank you, thank you. And periodically through my talk, I will tell you about us exercising our new Democratic majority and what we are doing in our state house and what we are working on. So again, it's going to be really, really interesting to watch Virginia as we go from, as I said, the former capital of the Confederacy to working to become an uber progressive state leading on climate. Virginia has a Green New Deal. And our Green New Deal is one of the most aggressive, progressive Green New Deals in the country. We have our first tenet, a moratorium on fossil fuels by 2035, a moratorium on all permitting and fossil fuel infrastructure by January 1st, 2021. Oh yeah, we got real aggressive. When we set up our mandatory portfolio renewable standards, we basically said they pertain to all retail electricity suppliers, not just the big investor-owned utilities. We said if you are supplying electricity in the great Commonwealth of Virginia, you will basically conform to our mandatory renewable portfolio standards. And then we put teeth in it. We said in the event that you don't, we will fine you twice what it would have cost you to do the right thing. Now, if you are messing with our environmental justice communities, then we will fine you triple. So we got real serious. So anyway, reclaim our vote. One of the reasons why we ended up naming our project Reclaim Our Vote rather than Reclaim Their Vote is simply this. When we looked at what was going on in US elections, when we looked at blue states and we looked at voter suppression states, we realized in blue states, you've got enough progressives to basically win an election without major community of color support. Generally, you have it. But when we looked at states that weren't blue, what we realized was, if we take the progressive vote and then we go and add the community of color vote to it, that allows us to reclaim our vote. And then the progressive voice begins to win the day. So that was the whole idea behind Reclaim Our Vote. And we already said we're a Virginia-based 501c3, and our mission is a very simple one. Our mission is to empower underrepresented voters. Now, I'm going to be talking to my board probably early next week about redefining underrepresented voters. Underrepresented voters to us historically has meant community of color voters, black, red, yellow, and brown. In looking at people in elected office, the most underrepresented voters are voters 18 to 24. And so I have begun the conversation with the board. Can we refine who underrepresented voters are? All right? And again, in looking at voting statistics in Texas, we are going to need that 18 to 24-year-old vote. And an interesting fact in Texas, by 2024, Texas will be a majority minority state. Yes. Oh, and then it was on this slide. The last thing is we are a technology company. 2 of my board members are computer engineers. One of them has made it his personal mission in life. Any type of technology that I need for empowering voters that doesn't exist, it has become his personal mission to invent it for me. So we'll be talking probably a little bit about some of our inventions, and we're going to be inventing more stuff. Now, I periodically refer to my board, who's on it. I'm on it, they haven't kicked me off yet. And I don't even think this board is thinking about it. Reverend Rodney Sadler. Rodney and I have worked together since 2014 when we formed our C4. Rodney is the health director for the North Carolina NAACP. And Rodney used to organize ministers for Reverend William Barber back in the Moral Mondays days. Philip Thompson and Jesse Frierson, I did a lot of work with them with the Virginia State Conference, NAACP, and they brought me to national NAACP to do civic engagement for Virginia. Dr. Gabriela Lemus is president of Mi Familia Vota, and so I've worked with Gabby since 2013. So I go back to her Progressive Congress days. Bernard Simelton is president of the Alabama NAACP, and yeah, I'm gonna tell the story. I was going, am I gonna not tell the story? Yeah, when I get to that point, I'm gonna tell Bernard's story because it's fun. Deepak Puri is right in California. He's in San Francisco. He's invented some of our election protection technology. See something, say something. We're going to be working on new canvassing technology so that when we go into an area to knock on doors and register unregistered voters, in the event we come across people who have been purged or were never in the van, we'll be able to enter them into our tool. So we're going to build new technology for that. And Pamela Thomas, I worked with Pamela for years on Progressive Coders Network. So that's our board. Everybody that's on our board is very, very active in voting. People are like, okay, that was interesting, whoops. Core team members, Lisa, Nirvana, and Nancy have been with me since the Alabama elections. Actually, they go back to the Virginia elections. Carrie joined us in Alabama, and then this year we added Suzanne and Aaron Fisher. And this year, we actually have a campus organizing team. So again, we are looking very, very seriously at making certain that when we are having conversations with the 18 to 24-year-olds, they're actually talking to their peers instead of feeling like they're talking to their parents or their grandparents. And it's a whole nother dynamic. So I remember telling Aditi, if in the script we need to go, yo dog, tell me that so I can put it in the script, whatever is going to work. This is me. We're going to do this one real fast. The important thing to know about me is my mother would say I am a jack of all trades and I am a master of none. So I am a corporate trainer, I am a lobbyist, I am a political director, I am an IT director. One of the most fun things I got to do in 2008 was I was the Democratic nominee from the Virginia 4th Congressional District, which was really interesting because I wasn't a Democrat then, and I'm not one now either, but whatever. Yeah, I'm kind of way left of the Democratic Party. They haven't caught up with me yet. All right. I ran Dennis Kucinich's campaign in Virginia. Go Dennis. And I got some of my organizational training or organizing training when I was a regional coordinator for MoveOn.org. I've been a college professor, I'm retired now, thank heavens, for more than 30 years on the IT side. So my background is IT as well. So I'm not a total airhead. I mean, they managed to make me look like one in that photograph, but I am not. All right, now we're going to get real serious for a minute. All right, in the United States, the state of voting, there are 245 million age-eligible voters in the United States. 48 million are either inactive or deregistered. I use the term deregistered because the people that we contact used to be registered, and their state boards of elections, for varying reasons, have removed them from the rolls. So they are not just unregistered, they have been deregistered. Now, 16.6 million community of color voters are inactive or unregistered going into the 2020 elections. These are our people, that's 16.6 million. Now, Texas. How many votes do we need to win the presidency in 2020? There's one correct number, and only one. 270 electoral votes. No other number matters, 270. We came up in 2016, 39 electoral votes short. In 2020, we will have all those states we had in 2016, and we're 39 votes short. Texas will give us 38 of the 39 votes that we need. So my heart is in Texas. I am loving me some Texas. All right, now, let's take a quick look at Texas. Texas has 13,464,712 people who, if an election was held today, would actually be able to vote. Now, there are 1 million African American voters. There are 3.2 million Hispanic voters. So look at those numbers, 24.2 and 7.64. There are 276,000 Asian voters, and there are 4,000 Native American voters. Now, here's the bad news. Here's the news. Right now, Texas is 33.93% community of color voters. And these are people that are registered, these are people that are registered to vote. Unregistered, 5.1 million Texans have been deregistered. That is 38% of her population could not vote if they wanted to. And more than 50% do not know they have been deregistered. Texas has a very unique form of voter suppression that we have not encountered in any state. And now, if you ask Texas, do you purge voters and do you engage in voter suppression tactics, they're going to say, no, we don't. And then when you ask them, well, what do you do with your voters? They will say, well, every 2 years, we mail them a voter registration renewal card. Every 2 years. And if you don't send it back, then they put you on the suspense list. So I said, is that inactive? Oh, we don't have inactive voters. And I said, but does that mean that voters that are on the suspense list are just able to come in and vote and they don't have to show extra ID or do other things? Like, well, yeah, they've got to do extra ID or other things. So basically they're inactive. All the other states call it inactive. You want to say they're suspended, but it's basically the same thing. And 5 million can't vote. 2.3 million of that 5 million are community of color voters. All right, whoops, press the other button. Let's see if I remember the trick. Look at me. All right, now, Texas, voter suppression. Your voter registration technically expires after 2 years, and you've got to re-register. Texas, like all other voter suppression states, has a very strict photo ID requirement. They have no same-day registration. So if you believe you were registered to vote, you've been deregistered, you show up to vote, you're not voting. And finally, there is no automatic registration, and there's major voter intimidation at the polls. So part of our strategy for our Hispanic voters and our Black voters, especially those voters over the age of 65, is for them to vote by mail. Because in the event that they show up at the polls, there is a very high probability they are going to be met by Confederate flags, people in the parking lot taking pictures of their license plates, and people, basically everybody's got a gun in Texas, people brandishing their weapons. So we need to make sure that people who want to vote are going to be able to vote. Our partners. I'm partnered with National NAACP. They provide me with access to the National Voter File. So I have access to all 50 states. In some states, I'm working on getting state voices, because with state voices, progressive organizations use that, and I get a lot more cell numbers, so that gives us the ability to text into those states. Rapid Resist. A number of people probably know Rapid Resist, Yoni Landau, and his folks who have done an amazing job texting. We're partnered with local groups that are on the ground. So we work with Move Texas, the Texas Organizing Project, Mi Familia Vota, and their Indivisible Corpus Christi, and the groups are constantly growing. So not only do we do our work remote, but as Mary said, we like to be partnered with groups on the ground so that when we end up with a lot of disconnected phone numbers, we can say, here, can you go and knock on these doors and see, are the folks still behind the doors? And then Dem Labs, of course, Progressive Voters Network, and Vote Riders. Now, the work we did in 2019, I'm going to go over this rather quickly because we want to get to what we need to do. We wrote, and this was our first year of ever doing postcards, we wrote 347,000 postcards to North Carolina and Virginia. And we had never done postcards before. We sent 114,000 text messages in 4 weeks in Virginia. Those were the incredibly rabid VA ratify ERA ladies. Yes, Virginia is working on being the 38th state to ratify the Equal Rights Amendment. And they may have actually completed the ratification because they actually had to ratify twice. And then it will be my job to go back as a lobbyist in Congress and work on getting Congress to blow the deadline. And then we go and have the fight of our lives in the Supreme Court. Nothing but fun. All right, now, we made over 90,000 voter registration and GOTV phone calls, and we built a brand new app. we built the Give a Ride app, which provides free rides to the polls. So somebody said, why don't we just call it, it's like Uber for voting, all right? And a note from one of the Virginia websites about the Virginia 2019 election. All right, now I'm going to take you back. In 2015, Virginia had 100 seats in her House. She still does. In 2019, there were 47 seats where no Democrat ran. No candidate, you're guaranteed to lose the election. In 2017, we came within one vote of literally splitting control of the Virginia House. I think most of you remember pull the name from the fishbowl. All right? Now, in 2019, nearly 40% of voters statewide cast ballots in this year's General Assembly elections, up from 29% in 2015. So in 4 years, Virginia, capital of the Confederacy, turned completely blue. So thank you, Indivisible West Marin, for joining us in 2018. Before 2018, Virginia had never had a woman federal officer before. In 2018, she sent 3 to Congress. And then there were 5 that ran, and the 2 that didn't win got the highest number of votes of any Democratic candidate in their district. So we did really good work. Now, Texas. Texas has 36 congressional districts. Now, in 2020, they've got 1 Senate race, they've got 36 House races, 4 of the seats are actually open, and on the Texas State Senate, they have 16 seats, and 1 is open. The entire Texas House is up for re-election, and there are 8 open seats. Now, sister district, I had an opportunity to speak with them. They work very hard on state races. We are concentrating on federal races. What we will do is we will look and see where we really match up and look at votes anywhere in the state count toward the Senate and hopefully the presidency. Hopefully people go all the way up. They generally don't start at Senate and go down. They're normally going to start at president and then go down. And hopefully we can get them to go all the way down that ballot to the state Senate and the state House. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this slide. There are, and this is unusual for Texas, there are 13 Democratic candidates that are running. I think there's 13. I added on its slide. Yep, there are 13 Democratic candidates that are running. Some of them, it was very hard to find their pictures, so they must be really, really scary looking. All right? But again, look at the number of women. They've got community of colored folks running. There's even a black guy in a cowboy hat. So, I mean, Texas is a happening and a changing place. All right? Now, there are only 5 people running on the other side. All right? Whatever. Yeah. Woo! All right? Yeah. And then, let's see. Let me go back 1. We didn't need to see him anyway. Now, population statistics. Maybe I do need to go back. I was going, oh, here we go. Population statistics. These are the races that are of the greatest interest to us. District 2, 3, 10, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, and 31. Look at the populations of those districts, the community of color populations. Look at District 22. Now, these are all seats where in 2018, Beto took more than 40% of the vote, and at the same time left more than 50% of the community of color vote on the table. So that means these districts, this is the progressive vote without the community of color vote. We go and get that community of color vote, and these districts are ours. All right? All right, I like it. Now, Texas in these districts, this isn't Texas anymore. This could be almost California or any other state. This is a state where I think the lowest number of college graduates is 22.1%. These aren't cowboys anymore. These aren't oil riggers. These are college-educated people who are not poor, who are earning from $53,000 to $95,000. And I describe them as people who like their kids and don't want their kids shot at school. So their number one issue, even though they live in Texas, is not guns. They've got other issues. Now, in 2018, these numbers are frightening and they're dismal. I'm only going to take Texas 10 because I know numbers like this tend to give people headaches. I mean, numbers like this really get me excited, and people are going like, oh, good grief, look at all those numbers. All right, 18 to 24, out of 18,155 registered, active, able to vote right now, 18 to 24-year-olds, 756 showed up for the primary. Yeah, that's painful. All right, now, our 25 to 34, out of 20,000, 1,366 showed up to vote in the primary. That's almost even more painful. Now, 35 to 49, the numbers get a little bit better. 2,400 folks showed up to vote. We have the voters. And as one of our partners in Texas said, we have the numbers. We just have not been able to get them to go out and vote. And that is what we are going to be working on changing in Texas. We are going to re-register the ones that fell off the rolls, and we are going to work on figuring out what it is going to take the ones who can vote to go out and to vote. Now, our campus outreach. We've got 288,000 18 to 24-year-olds, community of color that are in Texas. And they vote, and this is the general, roughly, barely 10.5%. All right? So we are going to be doing phone banks. We're going to geofence. I'll tell you what that is. We're going to be using mobile ads, and we're going to be using social media for voting. We are going to modify and add to what we normally do in Texas to work on bringing out and appealing to those 18 to 24-year-olds, because they are going to need to step in, step out, and take the power that is rightfully theirs. So if they don't want to be underrepresented anymore, then they better step up. And we're going to tell them that. That power is just waiting for them to step up and take it. And we all know the number one rule of power. Power is never given, it has to be taken. So they're going to have to be willing to take it. All right, now, geofencing. We did geofencing in Virginia. We also originally started it in North Carolina. Geofencing is young people love their mobile devices. They're married to their mobile devices. They probably are in love with their mobile devices. What geofencing allows us to do is locate mobile devices, and then send a message to it. So what we did in North Carolina 3 was we geofenced the Wi-Fi server of every college in North Carolina 3. We are planning on geofencing every college in the great state of Texas. Now, in North Carolina 3, North Carolina, remember, is much tinier than Texas. In North Carolina 3, we found 348,000 devices by following the devices connected on Wi-Fi. We're going to find a lot of devices in Texas. Now, in Virginia, we did a geofence on an event. Virginia has a number of HBCUs. So at a particularly big football game between two of Virginia HBCUs, we geofenced that event, meaning we hit every cell phone and tablet that was turned on at that event, and we sent them an ad. Yeah, having a retired Google engineer really does come in handy. So, all right, and then the other thing we can do is we can take a set of addresses and then geofence by address, and then find all the cell phones at an address. Now, we're going to geofence by address. Normally, we have to do it over a 7 to 10 day period to see which devices remain at that address. Those devices probably live there as opposed to being visitors. All right, now let's see, whoops. Not only are we going to do the college campuses, Wi-Fi, and if we get appropriate sporting events, we're going to hit the large churches. There are a little more than 1.9 million African American voters in Texas. We're going to find the biggest black churches, and we're going to geofence those. Now, in North Carolina, these were the ads we used. We were partnered with Black Voters Matter, and we developed 2 ads. Our votes decide elections, and elections have consequences. They had a special election, and increased power in our communities helped determine our own destiny. We're going to be working with people on the ground in Texas to find out what set of messages do we need to be sending to young Texas voters to make them go, wow, I never realized that we could determine who's president, control of the Senate, and all the way down the line. Now, we're also going to be investing in something called Motivo. It's sort of social media for voting. Young people love social media. Everything they do, they want to share it with their friends. They like being competitive. They like the idea of earning points and winning prizes. So we put all that together under voting. So they can create teams. We are reaching out to colleges, hoping that every college will have their own team, hoping that the students within each individual college will want to compete with each other, and different colleges will want to compete with other colleges. Now, what's it look like? Well, check your polling place, verify you voted, check out who's on your ballot, and they get points every time they complete something. Let's get to know you, put election day on your calendar, make a voting plan, check if you're registered to vote. And the other thing we can do is, if we have volunteer opportunities or paid job opportunities, we can put this right under Motivo. We can put under Motivo, do you need a ride to the polls? Are you willing to give a ride to the polls? We can constantly feed them information under Motivo, including everything that's on their ballot. And then there are the prizes. So I know, we're like, why would I want to win this? I would just go buy it. You're not in the 18 to 24-year range where it's just so much fun to win it. So again, these were some of the gifts that they had in the Virginia motive vote. We will look at what makes sense when we do Texas, what makes sense when we do Alabama, and our various other states. Now, rural. Texas, most people, including the Democratic Party, unfortunately, think of Texas as Houston and Dallas. That is a guaranteed recipe for disaster. A lot of Texas is rural. So in addition to the phone banking and the postcards, we're going to put up billboards. We're going to work on locating a lot of the billboards near where the colleges and the universities are so that we can advertise motive vote. We want to use digital billboards so that we will have 4 screens of messaging that will be rotating. Now, these billboards generally are going to be 36 feet by 10 feet. So in a rural area, when you're driving down a lonely road and there's this thing standing there that's 36 by 10 feet, it's a little hard to miss it. All right? Here's the sample of one of the billboards we used in North Carolina. Come on, Clicker, don't quit on me now. Hello, Mr. Clicker. Oh, there it is. There it is. So again, that's a digital billboard we used in North Carolina. Now, in North Carolina 3, we did not win that seat, but we put up billboards. We had the equivalent of motive vote. We didn't know about motive vote then. We were using something else. So in an election on the tail end of a hurricane that nobody knew was happening because both of the people who ended up being the nominees, they had spent all their money on the primary. I remember when we were calling into North Carolina 3, people were going, "Are you sure there's an election? There's not even a damn yard sign." And so I went and looked at it, and it's like, that's because both the candidates are dead broke. So we put up the billboards. And like I said, we didn't win the seat, but we turned in the highest Democratic performance of any congressional candidate, including in the Obama years, on $12,000 of our money on the tail end of a hurricane in an election that nobody knew anything about. And we softened up North Carolina 3, which is really important. Now, we've got a new app, Give a Ride. I'll show people that later. Electoral votes per state. You're going to like this. These are the states where we're looking at working. Georgia is still kind of, are we or are we not? But Alabama, we already won in Alabama. They've got 9 electoral votes. Arizona is looking very strong with 11. North Carolina, we've already been there. We know North Carolina, 15 votes. We did Mississippi in 2018. Now, remember when the Republicans went through the Rust Belt and they took Ohio and Pennsylvania and Wisconsin and Michigan? It's payback time. We put a black man in the Senate in Mississippi. Put an exclamation point on it. All right, Georgia, and then Texas at 38. So we need 39 more electoral votes. There's 133. So we've got a number of different ways to win. Now, Alabama is 29% community of color with 32% of her voters deregistered. North Carolina is 28% community of color with 38% of her voters deregistered. Are we seeing a pattern here? Yeah. All right, Arizona, 21%, they just made it. They were 20%, that's our cutoff. 33% deregistered. Mississippi, 33%, 24% deregistered. So Mississippi, the registration is good. And then Georgia, 38% community of color. We ought to be able to win in Georgia, but Georgia's really tough. We've got to get 64% of the vote because Brian Kemp has got both hands and both feet on the election machinery in Georgia still. All right, so that's it. That's the end of my presentation. And I've got a couple minutes, so I get to do story time. People periodically want to know how I got into elections. I'm from Chicago, and I was born into a political family. So I grew up, I had two uncles who were aldermen in the Daily Machine, so I grew up sitting in vote counting rooms on election night, crawling around under the table. And when I was 10 years old, my mother told me something very important. She said, if you ever run for office in Chicago, make sure you get the dead vote. And I said, excuse me? She said, the living vote once, but the dead always vote, at least 3 times. And then she told me something else that really stayed with me, that really has a lot to do with what you've just seen. She said, the other thing to remember is there is no election run in the city of Chicago where Mayor Daley doesn't know who won before the first vote is cast. So this is what voter suppression is giving the other side. They know who won before the first vote is cast. It is our job to change that dynamic, to flip that narrative and empower the voters whose vote is being stolen. And again, remember, if their vote is being stolen, our vote is being stolen. So this is very personal to every one of us in this room. So I'm going to end right there, ahead of my time. Yay. And I'm going to say thank you very much, and I am ready for Q&A.
So when we usually hear about voter suppression, it's usually a message of doom and gloom. Many of you came to watch with Main Street Moms a film called Suppressed, and it had many people in tears because of the terrible things that it meant for individuals and our democracy. Andrea brings a message of the hard truth. There is a lot of voter suppression. There are many people of color who are shut out of the electoral process. They are purged from voter rolls who at a much higher rate than white voters. They are not contacted by political campaigns or candidates because they do not seem like likely voters. The myth of our democracy is a far cry from the reality. But Andrea also brings, I think, a message of hope. But it is the kind of hope that materializes only if we make it be so. She shows us a pathway to winning elections by reaching out to voters who have been taken off the rolls, especially voters of color, and helping them re-register and vote. So we want to give you another opportunity this evening to financially support Reclaim Our Vote, to support people of color, and to support the fabric of our democracy. Many of you have already given. We thank you from the bottom of our hearts. If you can give more, that is wonderful. If you haven't given at all, please think what you can do. Take a few moments and think, how much can you give? How much is it worth to you to support this important work? How much can you actually give to reclaim our democracy and our vote? This work can't happen without your financial support. For what? Hiring low-income seniors to phone bank, Hiring low-income college students to canvass in semi-rural areas, purchasing billboards in rural areas, geo-fencing college campus locations and large black rural churches, purchasing cell phone numbers for texting programs and paying for the texts. We have computers in the back of the room if you want to pay with a credit card and make an online donation. There are donation jars at the table here, and as you go out the front door, please give whatever you can. And there are also actions that you can do. There was a flyer on each of your chairs. Please take a look at it. Please take it home. You can start doing something first thing tomorrow afternoon. Come to our phone bank into Texas to start right away, calling seniors, calling young people, urging people to re-register to vote if they have been purged from their voter rolls. It will be at Carolyn Longstreth's house, 2 to 4 p.m. I emphasize 2 to 4 because there may have been a misprint in the light. Carol Whitman is the contact for Carolyn's address and directions. Carol's email address is on the flyer on your chair. Indivisible West Marin members and others gather 3 times a week to postcard and phone bank for democracy. I know there is at least one day, one time slot that will accommodate your schedule. Please make a commitment to give an hour or 2 each week, especially during this month of February before the March Super Tuesday primaries. And now a word from Kathy Calloway about postcards.
Cigarette? Postcard? So, clearly I don't have enough cigars for all of the people here tonight. I only have like 60 packets of postcards. 60 packets of postcards. But I do have some also, I can give you a little piece of paper that has my email on it so that you can contact me. We meet every Tuesday at the firehouse here in Point Reyes between 11 and 1. And these little packets come with stamps already, pretty clear how to do them, and you mail them. And we've done thousands, and it's really fun. So after the program, I'll be right over there, and you can come grab a packet and contact me if you have any questions. Thanks.
And so now, again, there's a index card on your chair. If you have questions, please write them down. Pass the cards to the outer aisle. Somebody will collect them, sort them out, and Andrea can begin to answer them.
All right, question number 1. What is the big picture strategy for determining the states that we are working in? In other words, where did those states on the other slide come from? Again, the only number that matters in 2020 is 270. There is no other number that matters. So the states that we look at, number 1, we generally wanted 9 or more electoral votes. Texas with 38, as I said, is absolutely fascinating. We also require that there be a Senate race because we want, this is Marin County, we want it all. I used to live here, I know that saying. And the other thing is my board requires a 20% community of color before we go into that state. So that meant that states like Ohio, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin do not meet our community of color threshold. So we are going through the South. Again, the other side went through the Rust Belt, fine. We'll go through the South. Will we work in Arizona and Colorado? Arizona meets the threshold Colorado is really, 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 really leaning blue. So the board closed their eyes and said, okay. So yes, we are going to work in Arizona and Colorado. Again, Arizona literally right at the threshold. Colorado significantly lower, but tipping, and they're like, okay, fine. Just don't talk to us about Colorado. Do voters in other states resent calls from California? Oh, we've gotten that a lot. Do people of color in rural South mind getting calls from white people? Okay, all right. Now, gee, we're filming this and I'm not supposed to tell this story. But when we originally started calling Alabama in 2017, people were really concerned, were they helping or were they potentially hurting? So I called Bernard Simulton and I said, I'm getting a lot of questions from people because they're calling into California and people are going, we are obviously not Southern and we are obviously not Black. Is that okay? Because a number of people had heard from other organizations that Doug Jones said, I don't want anybody calling Alabama that does not have a Southern accent, so go away. So I said, Bernard said, well, okay, don't tell anybody, but I've got a story that will answer that question. He was taking an elderly aunt to church in one of the Black Belt counties. He was getting himself a cup of tea, and some of the older ladies were standing around and they were chatting. And all of a sudden, he hears his aunt say, did you get a call from the white people? and Bernard said he nearly dropped his cup of tea. And she goes, the white people called me. And they told me I was a very important voter. And they wanted to know, was I going to vote? And I said, of course I'm going to vote. I have always voted. And then they wanted to know, did I have the proper ID? And I assured them that yes, I did. And then they wanted to know, did I need a ride to the polls? And I was sure I had a ride, so I said, no, I did not. And so then she looked around her group and she said, have the white people called you? And so apparently we hadn't called some of her other friends, and she said, well, you're probably further down the list. And that became a thing with the older ladies. Did the white people call you yet? So the answer is no. People don't resent it. And here's my version of the story. Everybody knows when an election is. It's kind of like a dance in a town. Everybody knows when the town dances. They know where it is. It's just certain people don't feel that they're invited. We, by making these phone calls, invite people to the dance that we call democracy. Which is most effective, postcards versus phone banking? Isn't door-to-door canvassing more effective? All right, here, I'm gonna give you this back. I know this question. We get asked this a lot. Now, the most effective method of canvassing is door-to-door. Since we don't live in the southern states, that really isn't an option that is open to us. That's why we partner with groups on the ground. But that direct outreach via phone is nearly as effective. Now, if you've ever done our phone banks, you know we always leave messages. And let me tell you why, and Alabama proved this. After the Alabama election in 2017, I went back and I looked at the statistics. We made 43,000 phone calls in 10 days. That's a lot of phone calls in a very, very, very short time. Now, when I looked at the number, I realized our canvas rate, where we actually talked to people, was relatively low. We were down around 18%. But our left messages was at 56%. So people we called had answering machines, and we left messages. Get ready for this, because I actually ran the numbers 5 times because I wasn't sure I did it right. And then I had my partner, who's an accountant, come in and run the numbers because I was going, this can't be right. 85% of the people we called voted. It didn't matter whether we talked to them or not. The fact that we called was a big deal. It was the invitation, because party didn't call them. Now, here's kind of, I was standing, my partner does a ton of phone banking. He's a mental health clinician. He's got one of those really calm voices. Everybody loves talking to him. So he was phone banking, and he called an African-American woman in her mid-40s in Mobile, Alabama. That is not a backwater rural county. Mobile is a city. And the woman listened to everything he said. She answered his questions. And then she said, you know, I've had this phone number for 15 years. This is the first political call I have ever gotten. Okay? So we really need to extend that invitation to vote. The party likes connecting with people that are sure thing voters. We all know that person, right? If it's not a sure thing, I'm not going to make the effort. So we are doing the outreach, and we want to let people know there's an opportunity. Oh, okay. Can reclaim our vote, do something to prevent the closing of voting sites on Election Day, causing minority voters to wait hours online? And can we prevent the overcrowding of voting places in African American and poor communities? Center for Common Ground runs a larger campaign called Let Me Vote, Count My Vote. Reclaim Our Vote is on the Let Me Vote side, getting people in the front door. The Count My Vote side is where the attorneys are, and we go and sue boards of elections. So the answer is by doing some planning, yes. So in Texas, our voters 65 and over, we are going to be working on getting them to vote by mail. We also are probably going to be looking at doing the same thing for college students. In states that have early voting, this year we are going to run Give a Ride for early voting. And if we can't recruit enough drivers for early voting, I have become a Lyft corporate client so that I can dispatch Lyft to pick up my voters, take them to vote, wait for them, and then bring them home. And because I am a corporate client and not just a regular I happen to call Lyft, then they actually really are making an effort. So by understanding the types of suppression that's used. In Georgia, we know don't deliver enough machines. So in Georgia, we're really going to be working on getting people to early vote so that we reduce the number of people standing in line on Election Day. We know the tricks in Georgia. I have a love-hate relationship with the Virginia State Board of Elections. So when I noticed in the 2019 elections that in the 2 largest African American precincts, in a race that we were working that the polling location appeared to be changed, I was able to contact the Board of Elections, get the updated list, and then get that updated in the copy of VAN that we were using, and then also send it over to the NAACP. So with Give a Ride, we are sending our attorneys in to get the updated list of polling places, knowing that states can change or close a polling place in some states literally up to 2 weeks before an election. Most states, it is 30 days. They've got to notify people if a polling location is going to close. They've got to give them about a month's notice. But what they do not have to do, and we ended up having to do it ourselves in Virginia, is they don't have to tell people where the new polling place is. Right, so we had to station people at the old locations saying the new polling location is here. So we are looking at being prepared with partners on the ground to do that in all the states that we go into, which is why I won't go into a state if I don't have people on the ground. So that when I find out information like this, we are prepared to respond. It isn't rocket science, but it does require determination that you are going to beat them at their own game. Okay. I have young adult kids and work as a local psychotherapist. I've surveyed many young adults who have given up on adults and the world, what to do to encourage them to vote. And then here's another similar question. My understanding is 18 to 24-year-olds care most about climate and social justice, and that is really true. Can you say more about how you will inspire them to vote? Or if you're partnering with any conservation activist groups? As I said, Virginia has a very aggressive Green New Deal. I chair one of the Virginia Green New Deal committees. I am a climate activist. I am also a voting rights specialist, so I can walk and chew gum at the same time. So injustice is injustice is injustice. So we are really working to bring our climate people into the voting space. And we're finding a lot of resistance. And what we normally say to them is, if we don't vote the people in office that are going to enact the policies you're talking about, great policies with no one to actually make them law get us nowhere. So we are beginning to see movement on the climate side. So yes, we will be using climate hopefully as one of our main issues when we talk to the 18 to 24-year-olds, saying we get it that what you are working on is you want to protect this world, it's the only one we've got, so that you will be able to have children and raise your children in a livable world. But that's one of the other reasons I went to the board saying, I think we need to reach out to all 18 to 24-year-olds regardless of race, because there is a reason they are not voting, and they do need to understand, if climate is your issue, step up and step out and take it. Make it happen. Your parents did that in the 60s with voting rights or the ability to vote, such as it is. You are going to have to do that for climate. We messed up the world. You're going to need to straighten it up. And thank you all for this incredibly legible handwriting. Okay. I already did this one. This is postcards versus phone banking. Yes, 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 yes. Now, I will say that what we found with 100% of our wrong numbers, when we take those, and if we do have people on the ground that can canvass, 80% of the people are still behind those doors. Right. They haven't moved, they just changed phone numbers. What about Michigan, Wisconsin, Illinois, and, Ohio? Okay. Michigan, Wisconsin, and Ohio do not meet our community of color threshold. Wisconsin is 5% community of color. Right, overall. Now, when we look at Madison and we look at Milwaukee, yes, we have individual cities that meet the threshold, but overall, the state does not. And that's also true of Michigan. It is true, Illinois, for the purposes of 2020, is blue. Chicago keeps Illinois blue. Because, right, when you get outside of Chicago, Illinois is North Alabama too. But Chicago is big enough that they save the rest of Illinois from itself. All right, and Ohio. Ohio does not meet our community of color threshold either, and they don't have a Senate race. Senate race. They don't have a Senate race that would be a pickup. So yes, I do my homework, and once a year I look at every single state and figure out the voting population, I count the community of color population, I break them down, and then I calculate the percentages. Someone says I'm uncomfortable with the concept of geofencing. So am I. But when you show up to a fight and the other side has brought massive computer infrastructure, right, you need to show up with something that is going to be able to counter it. So that's been our problem since 2014 when Chris Kobach introduced interstate cross-check and removed 7.8 million people from the rolls. And by the way, even though we don't use cross-check anymore, they never put those people back on. Okay? Oh, okay, got it. Okay. All right, your intended agenda is huge. What can you actually accomplish in the short time we have available? We want Alabama in 10 days. I got more than 10 days. I can accomplish anything. I mean, I have a plan, I know where to work. So we did not get permission from the NAACP to go into Alabama until 14 days before the election. It took the NAACP 3 days to get through their internal paperwork to actually give me access to another state. So by that time, we had 10 days. So that meant in the space of 10 days, I had to calculate what counties we were going to work in, build the phone banks, build the website, and that was history. I've got nearly 11 months. For me, that's a lifetime. Is the re-registration every 2 years directed at entire Texas voter population or just at people of color? It is, according to the Board of Elections, the entire state, that it is not directed at just individual population. So again, 5.1 million Texas voters have been deregistered. So yes.
Andrea, thank you, thank you, thank you. Please come to the phone bank tomorrow and to other phone banks that we have. Please take the slips that were on your seats home so you know how to take action. Please drop your donations into the jars at the doors or go by the back doors to use the computers to make an online donation. Thank you very much for your support.